Okay, I think we can get started. So my name is Caroline Moynihan, and I am one of the Adult Services Librarians at Lethbridge Public Library. Thank you so much for joining us for this year's Word on the Street Festival. Before we begin, I'm just going to start with a land acknowledgement. So Lethbridge Public Library acknowledges that we are gathered on the lands of the Blackfoot people of the Canadian Plains and pays respect to the Blackfoot people past, present, and future, while recognizing and respecting their cultural heritage, beliefs, and relationship to the land. The city of Lethbridge is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3. So today we have David Robertson joining us with his book, Blackwater, Family Legacy and Blood Memory. David is the winner of the Beatrice Monser Aboriginal Writer of the Year Award, the John Hirsch Award for Most Promising Manitoba Writer of the Year, and the TWUC Freedom to Read Award. His books include The Barren Grounds, When We Were Young, When We Were Alone, the winner of the Governor General's Award, a finalist for the TD Children's Literature Award, and the McNally Robertson Best Book for Young People. He also wrote Will I See, winner of the Mansilla Dias Book Design and Illustration Award, graphic novel category, and the YA novel Strangers, recipient of the Michael Van Ruy Award for General Fiction. He is the creator and host of the podcast. How do you pronounce the podcast, David?
Oh, Kiwale. Kiwale, yeah.
Through his writings about Canadian Indigenous peoples, Robertson educates as well as entertains, reflecting Indigenous cultures, histories, and communities while illuminating many contemporary issues. David is a member of the Norway House Cree Nation, and he lives in Winnipeg. So welcome, David.
Hi, thank you for having me.
I think David is going to start with a little bit of a reading, but if you have any questions that you would like us to ask David, please pop them in the question and answer, and then we'll go through them after David is done. So on to you, David.
All right, right on. Yeah, thanks for having me. It's nice to join you virtually. Wish I could be there face to face, but hopefully next year or whenever this pandemic is over, we can get together in person, because it's definitely a lot nicer to see people's face to face. But this is the next best thing. So, I appreciate being asked to be here at the Word on the Street. So I'll read you a passage from Blackwater, and I think it makes probably most sense to read the prologue. So I think that's what I'm going to do. Blackwater is, I think, a really uniquely structured memoir. It has it's centered around a journey I took with my father to his trap line. So we kind of gradually make our way there through the course of the memoir. And then through each chapter, it goes back to my life, my dad's life, and our life together, and just how it kind of all leads towards the trap line. So it's kind of like all this momentum heading towards my dad's trap line and going there together with him. And, we had been working on our relationship, and we've been going on this kind of journey of self-discovery for, I want to say, about 30 years. And when we got to the trap line, it was this real palpable, this real strong sense that all the work that we had been doing was to get us here, to get us to Blackwater. And when we were there, I just knew that I had to write about that journey and everything that went into getting us there. And to me, the momentum of history, of the generations of our family, it kind of all pushed us and brought us to that place. So, it's really a journey of, we look back to, the 1920s in the book, and then kind of lead all the way up to, when we got to the Blackwater about 2018 or so, 2019. So, so I wrote Blackwater. And I also wrote a picture book called On the Trap Line, which is also very heavily inspired by our trip there. So if you want like the kids version of Blackwater, it's On the Trap Line. But yeah, I'm just going to read you the prologue to Blackwater, and the reason why is I just think it's kind of the beginning of the end of our journey. And I say that because it's no secret that my father passed away about a year after we went to the trap line together. And so turns out that was the last time we could have possibly gone together. And so he asked me to go for coffee one day, and we went to just a coffee shop by my work, which we always did. We always kind of went to coffee once a week or so. And he, at one point, now it's funny because I was always the one who used to ask him questions. I would ask him the questions and he would answer them, and that's how it kind of went. But on this coffee date, he asked me a question. It was kind of a reversal of roles, and he just said, will you take me to my trap line one last time? And it kind of came out of the blue, but it was something that I had wanted to do for I think the last few years. And as when he asked me, I immediately said yes. And then we waited over the winter and then into the spring and early summer, and then we went together. So it took us about maybe a little under a year before we actually went from when he asked me. But yeah, so this is just like that moment. The prologue is that coffee date, really, and leading up to him asking me to go, or asking me to take him. Okay. Dad and I are sitting at a cafe by my work. He's ordered an Earl Grey tea with some sweetener. I have a decaf coffee splashed with almond milk. I'm facing Dad and a mirror, and I trade glances between him and my reflection, wondering where the years have gone. I'm growing my hair out, and all I can see are the gray strands. These ones right here, and there's more of them. I tease my wife, Jill, who's Métis, that I'm aiming for a man bun. But really, I think I'm trying to connect with something that I've been working hard to understand since I was in my late teens. That is, what it means to be Cree. I guess I feel as if long hair would make me more indigenous. Growing up, I had this vision of what an Indian is, and like it or not, that vision, despite all the work I've done, has stayed with me. In reality, a lot of my indigenous friends have braided hair, and a lot have short hair. It's a good thing my hair grows so damn slow. I've got time to figure out if I'm bugging Jill or trying to be cultural. That's the thing about journeys. They're never really over. I'll probably be doing this when I'm Dad's age. Maybe I won't be deconstructing the reasons why I'm growing out my hair, but it will have something to do with identity. It will have something to do with what it means to be Cree. My dad is Donald Alexander Robertson, duelist to those in our home community, Norway House Cree Nation. He's got an easy way about him, always has, but it's nothing to do with his 82 years. Everything he does is purposeful and measured. For a middle-aged guy living with anxiety, I find comfort in the way he exudes calmness. It's in the way he talks. Dad says something only when he believes he has something important to say. He's thoughtful and deliberate. I've learned to be patient in speaking with him, to watch his eyes, which are smaller than they appear behind prescription lenses, while they search for the right words, and then to listen carefully because he won't repeat himself. I've learned through practice because conversations with Dad aren't new. We've been at it for a while and often have sprawling discussions that somehow lead us into a better recognition of ourselves. The cafe is a frequent setting for our talks, but they don't exclusively occur here. There's also the golf course, the car, Mom and Dad's house, a restaurant both of us can eat at because I'm a vegan and he's got no large intestine, or before the lights dim in a movie theater. At the cafe, Dad gives me most of his attention, except when a friend walks by, which isn't uncommon. He used to run the place I work at now, the Manitoba First Nations Education Resource Center. In the early 2000s and in the early 2000s, and still knows people there. He likes to have coffee with me, then go see his pals. He roams the hallways with his easy stride and seeks people out. He's got a laugh that echoes through the building. You know when he's around, and it's infectious. People say that Dad and I have the same laugh. People say that Dad and I have the same walk. If you looked quickly at a picture of Dad's basketball team at Cook Christian Training School in the mid 1950s, you'd think that I'd pulled a Marty McFly and was standing there in his place. I like that we have these similarities. We've been having these conversations for almost 30 years. I'll ask Dad a question about his life, referencing any period between 1935, the year of his birth, and now. He'll think about it over a sip of Earl Grey tea, then respond. It'll be either the most thoughtful answer you can imagine, one that feels as though he's prepared for it, and he likely has, or utterly dismissive, disappointing, because I want to know more, because I expect more, or at least something different. You know, he said to me recently, you can't tell my story from my perspective. This is your story, even if it's about me. It has to be that way. His story, my story. I'm not sure it's that simple. It's our story. And whether it's about a time in his life or a time in mine, what I want, what I've always wanted, is to figure out how his life, my life, and our relationship have shaped who I am. Time has moved quickly for me as well as for Dad. I notice this when we talk. Sometimes it feels like looking at him as another sort of mirror altogether, not just because we walk the same or laugh the same. I see in him things I want to be at the age of 82 and things I do not want to be because of the choices I think he made and how they affected me, even though I can't, even though I wouldn't, change what has happened. That's confusing for me, but it's a reality I've come to accept, even embrace. From what I understand, Dad, a broad shouldered, tall Cree, and Mom, English, Irish, and Scottish, with a beautiful smile and flowing brown hair, chose not to raise me and my brothers as Cree to keep us from the difficulties they thought we might face growing up in Winnipeg as First Nations kids. I don't think Cam and Mike even knew they were Indigenous. I certainly didn't, and we never talked about it. Not with Mom and Dad, and not with each other. What do you regret most? I once asked Dad in the car on the way home from an afternoon at our local golf course. That I didn't teach you the language, he responded, which I interpreted as, I didn't teach you about who you are. There are times when I catch myself staring at him and comparing the Dad I have in my life now with the other versions I knew growing up, if I knew him at all. His job was always a mystery, and I never asked about it. So too was his home community, Norway House. I didn't hear about it until I was a teenager. When I spent time with him, I was just happy to see him. We didn't have the kind of talks that we have now. We used to go golf on the weekends. We used to go to movies, but I never thought he'd be the best man at my wedding. I never thought he'd sit with me over coffee and answer all the dizzying questions I throw his way, mindfully stirring sweetener into his tea, thinking of things to say to satisfy my curiosity, expected or unexpected, disappointing or mundane. I watch his veins shift with each movement of his hand. The protruding tendons dance under his weathered brown skin. I watch his hand and think about his life and the lives of those who came before him, about my paternal grandmother, Sarah Robertson. I called her Nana. That's one of the only things I can remember about my grandmother, what I called her. The rest of my memories of her are just images. She's sitting in the kitchen in her house somewhere off Osborne Street wearing a flowered dress, her arms outstretched and ready to receive me, ready for me to run across the room and collide with her. It's like she's a dream I had once. Dad and I haven't yet started our dance of questions and answers today. Since he's knocked on my office window and we ambled over to the cafe, we've talked about the weather, how Mom's doing, how my kids are doing, how he's doing, how I'm doing. He's wearing navy blue set slacks that work hard to hide the boniness of his legs but fail, hush puppies on his feet, a white t-shirt underneath a black v-neck sweater, a fall jacket even though it's late summer. He gets cold easily. He looks contemplative. His eyes are narrowed, eyebrows collapsed, sending wrinkles across his forehead. When his eyebrows are relaxed, the lines remain. I have those too, like him. What are you thinking? I take a sip of coffee, then place it back onto the table. We meet eyes. There's 4 feet of air between us. We're in the least intimate setting, but I've never felt closer to him. He is absently playing with the lid of his tea, then leans forward the smallest distance. I want to go to my trap line one last time, he says. I know he hasn't been to his trap line for almost 7 decades. We've been on a journey as father and son for 30 years, and for the first time, it feels like we've found our destination. And I think maybe we've been headed there all this time. Whatever truth exists between us, the end of our journey, is in front of us. My dad is in his early 80s, and despite my best efforts to will his immortality, he's not getting any younger. He will not be a boy again. He will not be the father I used to know, the father I was unfamiliar with again. Years from now, he will not be this father either. Years from now, he will exist in memories, and I will be left to collide with the open arms of those moments. Okay, I say, let's go. After all this time, I think we are ready. And that's the prologue.
Wow. Thanks, David. I think that was a really great choice for maybe those who haven't had the great honor of reading it yet. I think that does a really good job of showcasing what your book is about. I was wondering if you could maybe talk to us a little bit about what the process is of writing a memoir. You have so many, like, you've written children's books, you've written, with graphic novels. So I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the process of writing a memoir.
Yeah, I think that writing the memoir it was probably the hardest thing I've had to do as a writer, but at the same time, the fact that I've been pretty versatile in my writing career, I think it helped me to be able to switch gears into, a nonfiction novel length form, and so that helped because I've been very adaptable. I've been able to be, I think moderately successful in various forms of literature, and so that definitely helped me. It also helped that I've been really telling this story for about 10 years. It's something that most public speaking engagements that I've had over the last 10 years in talking about, my journey as a writer and, my life and kind of inform my career. It was something I always circled back to my father and our relationship. And so, that helped too, because I think that over the years, as I've talked about his life and my life and our life, I've actually, in talking about it, learned more about it. Like either I've remembered more, or I've learned more as I've talked more and more with my father. I think that over the last 10 years, we've kind of we sped up the process of our journey because we kind of knew that his health was failing a little bit, and so a lot of it was from age, and a lot of it was from a health scare he had, a couple of decades ago. So that kind of background of like developing story before I had written it helped. Even though I'd never really planned to write a memoir about us, I had been doing it, without even thinking I was going to actually write it down. And then the process of writing it itself was, it was really cathartic in a way. And I learned a lot more about myself and my father than I had. That was just the last year of his life where we did a lot of talking with each other. We spent a week together just interviewing, about a couple hours a day. And that was really tiring for him. But I think that he also, by the end of it, he was really energized by it, because we were both getting something out of it. He was remembering stuff about his life that he had forgotten, and he really, I think, valued that. So I recorded a lot of our interviews, and that is something I cherish now because he passed away before I was done the book. So I was able to hear his voice. I mean, I was able to hear his voice because I needed to hear his voice to write the book. But I also just like when I missed him, I was able to press play and hear him talk. And so the crafting the memoir, it's not that dissimilar to writing like a fiction novel, because you're still having to craft like a narrative. You still have to tell, like you still have to tell a story that has some sort of a thread that you weave together all these scenes, and and you're the protagonist, in a memoir, right? Like you're the protagonist of the story. And even my friend Wab, who wrote The Reason You Walk, he had said that he fashioned that book after the hero's journey, which is like a fictional structure for like a novel, like a fiction novel. He used that same structure for his own book, The Reason You Walk. And we both love Star Wars, and so Luke Skywalker's journey was the hero's journey. I don't think I was so overtly trying to follow a hero's journey with my own life, but I definitely thought about what's the momentum of the story, how do you build tension, how do you get to the climax, and what's the denouement and all that. So I thought structurally about all of that and technically about that. And then I think this, like, it's finding um, the heart of the story. And so I think it was being able to contextualize everything against the or with the journey we took to Blackwater. So that helped anchor the whole story. And also, I guess, I try to use my own literary influences in the work that I do. And structurally, the novels, it was really influenced by the structure of a short story collection by Ernest Hemingway, called In Our Time. And what it does is it takes like little micro stories at the beginning of every chapter, and then larger stories within those chapters. And so I like that structure. And so that's why we kind of decided, Jen and I and Jim Gifford and I over at HarperCollins, to break up because originally I had the whole journey to the trapline at the beginning of the book. And then I went back and did all the life stuff, his life, my life, in the middle. And then at the end of it, it was him stepping onto the trap line. And then we decided to break up that journey to the trap line and begin every chapter with it and just spread it out. And then try to thematically match the section of that journey, the time the historical time that I was writing about. So that was also a bit of a challenge, but it was like patching it all together and making it feel seamless I liked that challenge. And then I think the last element was that I wanted to, through my story, try to make some sort of social commentary on some of the things that I saw that was happening in society or historically that I thought was important to address. So whether it's like racism, or whether it's residential school history, whatever it might be, I use this story as a conduit to talk about things that were really important to me to educate on. And so it's all these elements, trying to put them all together into like a seamless story, which I think we were pretty successful at. But yeah, so that's kind of what it looked like. And well, I mean, it took me about 6 or 7 months to write. It was harder because after my dad died, I took a couple months off, and I finished writing it. I had a couple chapters left, and then I think the difficulty there was, does the story change? Because I didn't expect him to pass away, and Jen and I just decided that it's not about his death; it's about his life. And so we didn't really address his passing until epilogue. And I think it adds maybe emotional weight to the story, but I'd prefer him to be with me. So
Yeah, I was going to ask you if you found, kind of mention it, like the cathartic nature of finishing your memoir, but how that grief and how that those emotions impacted your writing of it. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely impacted because when he passed away, I was just about 80% done the first draft, and so it definitely helped me to craft some of the book as I worked through subsequent drafts, like substantive edits and stuff like that. I think it just like in a way it became the story became more to me, it became not just a documentation of a relationship and of a journey. It also became a way to honor my father, and to try and like um, honor his legacy, because my dad did a lot of incredible things in his life, and so it I think the the book changed for me with the passing of my father, and so it did inform some of the work that we did following the book, and certainly it changed how the book ended. I mean, I kind of rearranged some things in the last chapter, and then I wrote the epilogue, which was probably the hardest I've ever had to write because I was like you're crying the whole time, and but yeah, I think that it didn't it didn't change anything really structurally, because I'd written most of it, but I think it actually, like, in the end, I don't want to say help the novel, but it did contribute to, I think, a more emotional resonance. And it's hard to, I mean, you can't. I think that what my dad always said is like, crying is important, and feeling that pain, allowing yourself to feel grief and pain is important because it's like your body working that out of your, working that out. And so that sort of emotional resonance, I think it helped me to it helped me to write the book in a way that I think pay tribute to him, but I think also allowed me to kind of heal through some of that grief. And certainly the podcast did too, because the podcast, the Kiweo, which is about my father and I, it's kind of like a sister project. I wrote the last two scripts after he passed away. I recorded the last two scripts after he passed away. And so it was the same sort of impact, I think, more so maybe than the book, because it did totally reshape the last couple episodes of the podcast. The last episode of the podcast, it was me just like trying to get through crying the whole time. And so if you listen to like the last episode of QA, which is called The Future, you can tell that I'm like bawling and trying to just like read, and trying to like not be performative, but to try and be honest with my emotions. And I think I was pretty good with that, like even in the book, like being emotionally honest and open. And I think that helps people connect with the story a little bit more too. So yeah, I mean, it was a really, obviously the hardest time of my life, and it was, but I think in the end, I think the book is something that he would be proud of.
I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about the podcast and why you decided to do a sister project with the book.
Yeah, I kind of look at it as like I have my dad trilogy, so I have Blackwater, and I have the On the Trap Line, which is the picture book, and QAO, which is the podcast, and that's my dad trilogy. What was happening when I was doing the interviewing with my father, and I was working through the narrative structure of the book, you kind of do the same thing as you would with a novel, is that you have scenes that you get rid of because they don't fit, and so there were things that I wanted to talk about in the memoir that I just wasn't able to because it just didn't fit in with the story that I was trying to tell. And so I hated losing all that, I think, in a way. Like, even though I think it served the story well, and Jim and Den over at HarperCollins are really incredible editors, but I hated losing parts of the story, or making decisions to not talk about some things that I really spent a lot of time on. So, like, I spent a lot of time trying to figure out what happened to my auntie, and I spent a lot of time trying to figure out what happened to my great uncle. And then it just didn't, those sort of like investigative mysteries didn't really fit into what I was doing. So I approached CBC, and I pitched them this idea of doing a companion piece to Water, this podcast companion piece, where I could dive into some of the stuff that I wasn't able to address in the book because it didn't fit, or take a more in-depth look at some of the things I wasn't able to spend as much time on in the book as I would have liked to. And so it was more of like it was like an expansion pack of Blackwater in a way. And yeah, and then I think it was also being able to use my father's voice, and Blackwater obviously. I wasn't able to, you can't hear him. I mean, I quote him directly often, but you can't hear him. And I just wanted people to hear his voice, because he's just such a calming influence, like he's like a grandpa. And he's just, I don't know, like I just wanted people to meet him, in a more intimate way. And I think hearing someone talk is more intimate than reading their words. And so I think all of that went into why I did QAO. And yeah, so it was a 5 episode run, and on CBC, and it did pretty well. Like it won a podcasting award for the RTDNA, and I was really floored by that, and really happy about it. And but yeah, so that's why I did QAO, is because it's just stuff I just couldn't fit into the book, and I wanted to I wanted to I wanted to do it. Like I wanted to investigate the what happened to my auntie. I wanted to look like document looking for her grave, and things like that. Like, I think that was important for me. And it was I think that people who read Blackwater and then listen to the podcast will, I think, feel like I think they'll appreciate getting deeper into my story a little bit, in that form.
That's great. I listened to one of the episodes, and so you get that context that's not necessarily missing from a book, but it just sort of adds to it, the depth of it. So yeah, it's really great. Other people should check it out. I'm just switching like focus a little bit. You're quite a prolific writer. We had Mary Lawson on a little while ago, and she was telling us that in her 70 years, she's only written 4 books. And she always says that it's, quite the process, but, you, I think 3 books last year. So I'm just wondering, like, how do you structure your writing? How is it that you're able to, come up with so much new material?
Um, I think part of it is that I have a lot to say, and not to say that people who write less have less to say. It's just that I think that I made a decision in my career that I wasn't just going to write stories for fun, even though I like doing it. I want to write stories that create change. Like, I want, there's things that I want to accomplish in my career that go beyond just literature. I want to I want to leave a good legacy. I want to have left the world a better place when I'm done. And I think there's a lot of work to do in the area of reconciliation, and in talking about some of the issues that I think that aren't given enough attention, and that people need to learn more about. So whether it's the foster care system, or whether it's Indian residential schools, or whether it's missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, whatever it might be, every book that I write has a really explicit purpose to educate, and to try to create some sort of change, and to try and mobilize people to, to think about what their role is. And for something like reconciliation, what's my role in that process? Like, how can I be a part of it? And I think that informing yourself and educating yourself, helps you to understand what your part can be, what role you can play, to make, to figure out how you can make this world a better place, how you can leave a better place than when you came into it. And so I think that, and I learned that from my dad. I asked my dad once, if he thought he'd made a difference when after he retired, and he said, "Well, that's the decisions I made were because I wanted to help as many people as I could." But the other thing too is that he said, I won't see the end result of the work that I've done because it takes a long time, right? And so I've kind of held that in my heart as well, where I have to be patient, because I think that if we do work the proper way, change doesn't happen overnight. And so I've always had this long view of like, and that's why I write mostly for kids. Blackwater is an anomaly, because I think I've written 2 adult books, maybe 3, but you know, I write books for kids because I know that youth are going to be the ones who are going to make the difference. And so if we equip youth with knowledge, and we give adults, teachers, parents resources to give to their kids to educate them, then I think that we're putting ourselves in a better position to, live in a better world, whether it's climate or whether it's, free of racism or sexism, or, those sorts of things I think are really important to me. And so I just want to do as much with my time as I can, and our times are finite, and so I just want to do as much as I can. And I want to put out quality work. Like I think that I've worked very hard, and I've managed to, I think I've managed to put out some good books that have hopefully helped in some way. But and then just like the act of writing it, the practice of writing it is just, I have a wife who is very helpful, because she does a lot of work with the kids, and she keeps our whole house running. She's incredible, and she knows that I have this job, and she knows, I think, what I want to accomplish in my work, and she gives me the time to be able to do it, and helps me to schedule my time. So I'm able to kind of juggle a couple projects at once, and I write fast, but I think that I also just like, I have the time to do it. And I just think, like, if I have an hour to watch a TV show, which I still do sometimes, that's an hour I also could be writing. And so I just kind of look at it that way. And I just, I chip away at books. So I'll write maybe 1,000, 2,000 words a day if I'm working on a novel. And that means in a couple of months, I'll have a book written. And so, yeah, I look at it that way. And I think I have a lot to say, and I just want to say everything I have to say before I'm done. And so I just, I think I have about 15 to 18 books coming out in the next 4 years. And I'm excited about it, but I also have, I don't have a lot of spare time because of it.
Can you share any of the things that you're working on that we can expect in the next little while?
Yeah. So I have this ongoing, I think if anybody's heard of my middle grade book series, the Misawa Saga, the Barren Grounds has done, really, really well over the past year in Canada. And that's the first book in a series. So I actually have like 4 more books in that series that are, The Great Bear is coming out next week. And then I have one of them coming out every year for the next 3 or 4 years. So that's like an ongoing series. I have 3 picture books coming out in the next 3 or 4 years. One of them is about Memaguizuak, which is like little people who are in, Cree and other indigenous cultures in their folklore, in their legends. And I have a adult literary fiction that's coming out next year, which I can't really say much about, because it's kind of like, I think it's a little bit of a secret, but that's coming out. That should be coming out next year. I have like a middle grade kind of hockey book coming out, which is kind of seems like it's off brand for me, but it's actually about like it's about hockey, but it's also about how Indigenous kids deal with racism in hockey. And so it's like a fiction book. And I'm working on like an early years chapter book series and a couple of graphic novels I have coming out in the next couple of years. So it's just a bunch of stuff that I'm working on.
So we're almost out of time, but there's a question and then there's also a comment that someone just wanted to leave for you. So Lorraine said, I was struck by the imagery that you provided, you and your dad in the boat, and you attempting to get some photographs of your father, all while fumbling with your grandfather's old camera, and then realizing later that you captured the most beautiful image of your father. What a wonderful gift to have of him. So she just wanted to share that with you.
You guys, do you want me to show you that picture quick? I have it.
Yeah, that'd be great.
If anybody's curious, okay, hang on. I'll open it up here. Yeah, that's like this. I cherish that picture because, I think I can't take pictures of him anymore. So, here it is. Yeah, I took this picture like on a boat on the way to the trap line, and I couldn't like. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Yes. So like, it's my grandpa's old like 60-year-old camera, and I got like this 620 film, and it's impossible to use properly, and I hadn't really used it for very long. And you have to get all the settings perfectly right, and there's no business. I had no business getting this picture right, and the water was a little bumpy, and then I took this picture of my dad, and it just turned out like perfect. Like it's just like the best picture I've ever taken. And sometimes I just think there's something else happening there that made that picture turn out the way that it did. But yeah, it's thank you for saying that, because this picture is really, really important to me. And it was for a while I was lobbying it to be the cover of the book. And then they decided that it shouldn't be, but we stuck it. We put it in the back where we're paying tribute to my dad. But yeah, thank you for that. It's like, yeah, I really cherish this picture, and I'm happy that I have it. So
Yeah, Lorraine says that she's almost in tears, simply beautiful. So thank you for sharing that. We have time for just one more question. It's a quick one. Karen is wondering if you have actual time to read with your busy schedule, and if so, what you're currently reading.
Yeah, that's a great question, Karen. I'm very deliberate with what I read because I don't have a lot of time to do it, as you can imagine. I read a bunch of books for an award that I'm on a jury for this year, so that was fun because it was with writers I really admire and respect. I can't mention their names, but what I'm reading right now is The Sisters Brothers, I think, by Patrick DeWitt. And I just finished reading Lullabies for Little Criminals, I think, by Heather O'Neill, who I really, really love. And I'm just about to start reading Shiri de Maline's sequel to The Marrow Thieves, which I think is Hunting by the Stars. So she's a dear friend of mine, and so I'm really looking forward to reading that book. And Wob just came up with a book called Walking in Two Worlds, which is a great book. So yeah, those are kind of the books that I've just read, about to read, or reading right now. So yeah. But yeah, I don't read a ton because I'm writing so much, but I kind of have to, because you have to read to write better. So I definitely do read, but I don't read as much as a lot of people do, because I'm writing instead.
Well, perfect. Thank you so much, David. We're all out of time, so really appreciate you joining us virtually this year. And thank you, everybody else, for joining us today. And yeah, have a great rest of your day, everyone. Thanks, David.
Thank you, everybody. Take care.